Okay. So you did mention the difference between being a traditional Catholic, which all of us should be, and traditionalists, which is kind of, it's this word that's describing a movement and an ideology that's sort of, it's like, if we go back, things will be better. Things were fine past a certain point, but after that, they've been sketchy. And it's like, so which should we strive to be, you said?
Well, I don't see how you could be a Catholic and not be traditional. So I am happy to say I am a traditional Catholic, and in fact, I want to be as traditional as possible, as authentically traditional as possible. But the term traditionalist, as in trad, traditionalist Catholic, I don't care to have association with that movement, which is really more of an ideological or a philosophical movement than a liturgical one. Liturgy is, if you will, the battleground and the focus of it, but that's really not the essence of it. Are you familiar with Michael Lofton? Yeah, so I've just recently stumbled upon him. Seems to me just an outstanding lay Catholic theologian, and he made this point as regards traditionalism. That which is in the root will eventually make its way to the branches. And he put into words something that had occurred to me back in 2007 when Pope Benedict gave the motu proprio that allowed widespread use of the older forms of the sacraments, which was an enormous concession to the schismatic groups that he wanted to bring back into communion with the church. Right? And I thought that, and I think that was very naive, because it's really not about liturgy. It's really about authority. And have any of these groups come back into communion with the church? No, actually, it's gotten worse. And we gave them everything they wanted. But then what has crept into the Catholic Church are the philosophical and theological and ideological errors of that movement. So we never, ever would have imagined, if we went back to 2006, would you imagine that there's going to be tons and tons of young Catholics militantly opposing the Pope? What? No, Catholics don't do that. Loyalty to the Pope is that which defines Catholicism. That sounds like Protestantism, right? Would you think that people are going to be questioning the validity of an ecumenical council? All of these different things that went into the schismatic groups, and I'm thinking there especially of Lefebvre. Right?
Well, he is the father of traditionalism. I mean, his ideologies percolate into everybody's, even if they're in the church, but they think along those lines. It came from him, basically.
And so it's really a prideful rejection of magisterial authority. I mean, in a nutshell. And here its most popular manifestation is liturgy. But in other centuries, in other contexts, it's been soteriology. It's been morality. But what does it boil down to? The magisterium of the Catholic Church makes a definitive pronouncement or gives a definitive guidance. Do you accept it or do you reject it? Yes or no? Take your pick. And that's where the rubber meets the road,
Well, I mean, it's been explained, like in 2012 when they were really dealing a lot with the Society of St. Pius X, trying to negotiate their reunion. And then I think in 2019, again, they released some terms to them that were like, these are what you need to consent to in order to be considered in communion with the church. And they specifically stated that it was doctrinal. The issues under discussion that were keeping them separated were doctrines. It wasn't, and their issues with not accepting Vatican II. And basically, they don't even accept Pastoral from Vatican I because they don't accept the supremacy of the Pope. And
because they don't accept authority.
Right. Yeah.
And when you reject magisterial authority, you will eventually, whether you are Lefebvre or Luther, or you will reach logical absurdities, such as, the church has entered a great apostasy, and there's just a little remnant now, and there's no pope. That's fairly absurd. Just as absurd as um, before the printing press, there, it was just terrible, almost complete corruption of the church. And now that we have the printing press and Martin Luther, finally, everybody can know God accurately. Absurd, you know. I see this movement just getting just wilder and wilder. And to be honest with you, I think that the patience of a lot of pastors is being exhausted.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you,
by
about
these
your
people.
experiences. Like, what has been your experience interacting with and ministering to traditionalists in your parishes over the years? Because I know you've had some in and out. Like, what is that like for you as a priest?
Unfortunately, mostly negative. And not just, I'm going to broaden not just my experience, but also the experience of other priests whom I know, and to cast the net even wider beyond our diocese, because wouldn't want, I'm a specific person. I wouldn't want somebody to think, oh, he must be thinking of that parishioner or family, or he's referring to that priest or whatever. So I'm going to be really broad. I have priest friends all over the place, bishop friends, and the stridency, often the pridefulness, the selfishness, the dismissiveness of any considerations other than what a person's preferences are. It's so common that I used to be very naive and think, oh, well, if I would just provide the things that are desired by sort of this stripe of the Catholic faithful, namely, they want reverence, they want certain liturgical elements. So give them a reverent mass and give them ad orientem and chant and some Latin, and that they'll be satisfied. No, one priest put it this way: there's no satisfying these people. That's what he said. You can bend over backwards, make sacrifices, do things, fight battles maybe behind the scenes to do things. And then in the end, the moment that something better is available 32 miles away, they're gone. They'll drop their parish, their priest, their bishop, even, like a bad habit, because their main priority is what I want.
Wow.
Yeah, and priests and bishops, I think, have just, I have felt used and manipulated, let's say, to be brought over to somebody's house and wined and dined. And the whole point is to get me to offer the worship of Almighty God according to the way that these people want. And I would say, I don't operate like that. And then they're just gone. It's like, oh, well, so what was that all about? I was just being used,
Right. The ends justify the means, I guess, if you're if that stripe.
Yeah, and Pope John Paul II, he made a very insightful point that the opposite of love is not hate, it's use. When you use a person, you make that person the means to an end rather than loving them as an end in themselves. And I think that pastors in the church right now have felt very exhausted and burned by all of these different ideological, theological, liturgical tensions.
Yeah.
And the old liberals, they're dying off. They're going away. They're not. They didn't reproduce to begin with, and they're very old right now. So if I change something, am I most likely to get grief from an old liberal because I took away their guitar? No, it's most likely going to be because I didn't offer a mass exactly the way that this 24-year-old Traddy wanted it.